You're back for more of the Nevers here on Buzz Chomp, and I'm reacting to episode 6, the conclusion of part 1 of season 1. I'm Dan Salem, and there's an alien invasion. We've got time travelers. I didn't expect to be right about the aliens or the time travelers, but it's all true. It made it very clear that there's no gray area. Thank you, Nevers, for answering the questions. Thank you for making this show 100 times more interesting than it may have seemed to be. It's not just magical people in 1899. There's aliens. There's a future war where humanity was getting destroyed, and there's now touched people in the past with aliens in the past and people from the future in the past. This is awesome. Our main character, Mrs. True, Amalia, Molly, Zephyr, did come from the future. It makes perfect sense. It's why when I entertained the idea a week ago, I couldn't talk myself out of it, because everything about her made sense if she came from the future, which she does. The fact is, we had an alien, the Galanthi, escape into the past. There's a war between Free Life, PDC, the Planetary Defense. The PDC was trying to protect the Galanthi because these aliens came to Earth to help humanity. Only like 10 of them came. They're these large creatures, but they're very cuddly. They're very unassuming. What'd they mix? A T-Rex, an octopus, and an elephant? It's a great, great combination of things to create an alien species with. They were trying to save humanity. Well, the Free Life, God-fearing humans wanted to wipe them out. And so this alien fled into the past, created a portal into the past. I believe that portal remains open. I don't think the orb itself is the portal, but the orb may be the entrance to the portal. Zephyr, aka Mrs. True, killed herself because the war was lost in the future. She took these drugs that was going to kill her. And then we saw her soul her blue essence get sucked into the portal with the Galanthi and go right into the past and entered Mrs. True because Mrs. True had killed herself. So it was like an exchange. One body not being used got embodied by the soul of another that needed to be taken into the past. Zephyr was a stripe with the PDC trying to protect the Galanthi. So the Galanthi escaping into the past needed some protection, brought Zephyr with him. Other people went into the past too. We don't know if the other people with Zephyr in the future all went with her then when they died at the same time, or if others jumped into the portal or killed themselves to be sucked into the portal. We don't know if the portal's open or closed. We don't know if there are other Galanthi coming. That was the whole reason that the Free Life Army was trying to wipe them out, is they thought an invasion was coming. The aliens were going to invade, that they weren't actually trying to help humans. Stupid, ignorant humanity can't accept help at the most dire circumstances because of their own egos and fear and what have you. Who else in the past is from the future? Mrs. True, aka Zephyr. I love these AKAs. We got her whole backstory, right? And we saw her go to the blue orb because she was being called to it because the Galanthi was singing to her. But the Galanthi was singing to all of the individuals in which the spores touched. The spores activated things in people. But it also connected and spoke directly to those that came from the future. We got a really quick glimpse of everyone that maybe was called forth. It looks like Myrtle, who was speaking directly to Mrs. True, is from the future for sure. It looks like maybe the Beggar King and Masson and Swan and 4 or 5 other people, which I couldn't quite keep up with as they all flashed across the screen, might also be from the future. This truly makes the next part of the Nevers an unequivocally interesting quagmire. I have no idea who's from the future and if they're on the PDC side, on the Free Life side, on their own side, if they're a Galanthi themselves. We don't necessarily know if the Galanthi can put their own soul into a human, because this is this really super powerful, intelligent creature. It can't be accepted by humans. It tried and failed. Therefore, the group of scientists, but the overall humanity didn't accept them. Therefore, maybe it's trying to be a human. Maybe that's why Myrtle can't figure out a language to speak, because she is the Galanthi. Or she's from the future, another one of the stripes that were touched by Galanthi spores and were fighting to protect them to the death. She's in the past now. It seems like everybody that came from the future into the past is totally confused and out of place and SOL. This makes Masson and the Beggar King seem like maybe not, yet Masson locked his daughter in the basement. because she was touched and she, quote, died in his eyes. Is she from the future? Is he hiding a future person in his basement? Not just his touched daughter, but his daughter did die, yet she didn't die because she got embodied by the future soul of someone that traveled back, just like Zephyr. I think that's where we're headed. I'm not quite sure where Sarah comes from, because she was in the asylum, and that's where Mrs. True got placed once Zephyr embodied her not-so-dead body. Sarah, a.k.a. Malady, a.k.a. Reporter Boyle, got screwed over, sort of, yes, totally, by Mrs. True, because Dr. Haig, the evil Dr. Haig, who's creating a robot-touched army with Miss Bidlow, somehow, I have no idea how, came to speak to both Mrs. True and Sarah. Mrs. Bidlow gives Zephyr, aka Mrs. True, her mission to protect everyone else touched by the Galanthe, which makes me think Miss Bidlow is a Galanthe, or is from the future. Dr. Haig, same place. It does not appear that they got the truth from the orb, but maybe they obviously got some robot technology from the orb. They have touched that were created by the orb, the spores. It's unclear what the orb itself is, if that's the portal or not. Will more alien Galanthe invade the past? We don't know. This is like the perfect midway point of the season, but now it's part one conclusion, and now we're just left with this Pandora's box of interesting questions. The show keeps asking new questions and not answering the old ones. Well, it answered a ton of old ones, thank you. Mrs. True told Penance the truth immediately, which is why they were so close. We got to see how she screwed over Sarah because she gave Sarah over to Dr. Haig, let Dr. Haig experiment on Sarah, which I guess turned her into Malady. But she was already crazy, and she doesn't really know her powers. So I'm not quite sure what went down there. I'm not quite sure where anyone's from. What was most fascinating to me is Zephyr retained all of her memories as Mrs. True, but had none of Mrs. True's memories. But then I think the Galanthe, when she spoke directly to it, gave her Mrs. True's memories, but then took away the memory of the conversation itself. Why did it do that if it needs her to protect it? Who else is there, and what other things has it told it and then wiped clean of the memory? If it can do memory wipes, why doesn't it just mass memory wipe? I don't quite get the Galanthe's motivations. And that's the biggest question of all. Aliens! Time travelers! And a bunch of magical touch people in 1899. I'm Dan Salem. Subscribe to BuzzChomp for more of the Nevers and other amazing sci-fi great TV all year long. And comment below, what's your biggest question for this show? We have aliens, we have time travelers. I guarantee you there are other secrets that we don't know about yet that the show is going to reveal to us because pow to the face, it just did that. What else is there? Come back for more. Woo!